Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at noise abatement procedures. Now this is one of those things where my starter pilot self would be like, whatever, but as I fly, on a relatively routine basis in the real world, it suddenly started mattering. And what is the deal with a noise abatement procedure? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at one and get a feel for what's going on here. So what we can see here is, this is WhisperTrack, by the way, a pretty cool little website that actually gives you the ability to kind of take a look at these. They do a neat little report here where they talk about all the noise-sensitive areas. Yes, we're flying out of Hartford Brainerd here. I may have beat this piece of tarmac up just a little bit in the real world, but that's okay. One of the problems we have with Hartford is they're always trying to close the airport, and unfortunately, I think one day they might actually succeed, which makes this video a little bit, kind of sad, but you know what I mean. But one of the things we have here is that the lovely town of Wethersfield, right down here, and there's a lot of people who like to get their sleep. Of course, to the north side, I'm going to turn my head here so you can just see it. We have the lovely city of Hartford, Connecticut right over there. And there's this lovely industrial zone over here that we don't care about. And over on that side of the river, of course, opposite us on those kind of things, we have basically a bunch of swamp that nobody's really that interested in. So we don't have to worry about it too much. So what we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at exactly how this is executed and how it's going to change what we do normally. The first thing you're going to notice is that we're going to be taking an immediate turn off the edge of the runway after takeoff. We're going to try to overfly this as much as possible. Now, there's a neat little diagram that you actually can locate for the Hartford Airport that describes it in both directions. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of commercial stuff up here, so they don't mind so much. These folks, on the other hand, really aren't a fan of the noise. So there's a bunch of things we can do to try to improve it. The first thing is, after we take off, we're going to take a turn and stay over the river as much as possible. You can actually see all the commercial in here. There's an old Rensselaer Fields over on this side. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to reduce power. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but remember, what makes this loud is those giant propellers spinning at very, very fine pitch at very, very high speed. If we can reduce either or both of those elements, we can drastically reduce the amount of ruckus that we're going to be creating. The other thing we're going to be doing is, after taking this off, is we're actually going to take a turn and we're going to execute our flight pattern. What I'm actually going to do is turn around and show you what this is going to look like in the other direction. Now, one of the things I like about this here is it actually talks and breaks down all sorts of items here as far as different ideas for trying to improve that whole takeoff pattern. The other thing I really find interesting here is it describes a bunch of general tips here to be able to make sure things are a little bit better. One thing I really like here is make sure you gain altitude quickly. That's an interesting thing. The other thing you'd probably notice is going through here is they warn you about not increasing the RPM of the engine until you're on final approach, and I mean short final approach. So as we do this procedure, we're actually going to be trying to adhere to all those different suggestions at the same time so you can see kind of the difference between the two. All right, let's take off. First things first, we do not want to compromise safety, so we're going to go ahead and use a full power takeoff here. Nothing too crazy. Remember, we have that lovely little dike there that's got to keep some of the noise out. All right, let's start ripping down the runway. I love the bearing. This thing just goes. All right, we're going to lift the nose up. We're a multi-engine airplane. We're going to go ahead and retract. We're going to check to see if we're at a safe altitude. I'm at a safe altitude. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, which is going to be very scandalous for me, is I'm immediately going to reduce power. And I'm going to go ahead and take that gentle turn. Now, if you remember from the pattern there, we saw the fact that we could take that turn, and you can see right off my right wing, do you see all the houses? So the idea here is, in our pattern now, is we're going to turn away from where all the people are. And we're going to be executing this gentle turn over this area here where there's not going to be as many folks basically setting ourselves up. So we got a couple things you probably noticed. I'll go ahead and pause so we can go kind of take them all in. First thing you probably observed is I immediately reduced my power once I knew I was in a position to do so. The other thing you probably observed is I maintained my VY, which is going to give me the most amount of altitude in the shortest time possible. Combining those two elements together got me over 1,000 feet and out of the way of all these houses, just like we saw in that little diagram. So let's go ahead and open up that diagram again real quickly so you can go ahead and take a peek, kind of a thing like that. You can see we did our takeoff, we reduced our power, and then we snuck out this way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset us and get us in the opposite direction so we can show what happens to your traffic pattern when you try to follow a noise abatement procedure. All right, we have ourselves on our handy-dandy right downwind. It's not unusual to use right downwinds at this airport. It's just a little bit easier than flying over the city. And we got a lovely airport right below us there. I'm actually going to swing to the left a little bit. So there's a bunch of things we can do up here in order to decrease the amount of noise that we're about to make. The first thing I have is my RPM is actually pulled back significantly there. The other thing I'm doing is I'm maintaining a slower than usual speed kind of in the pattern itself. Remember, if I have to push those throttles forward, I'm going to be making a ton of racket here. I'm going to go ahead and take myself a little bit of a turn here. And I'm just going to kind of bring myself. That looks pretty good right there. But plop us back up to our correct pattern altitude. Yeah, we're getting a little slow. I'm actually going to add a little bit of power here. And I'm just looking at the airport itself and maintaining that low speed. Now, as you saw from our little diagram there, the key to this approach now is going to be to stay out of the way of all those houses that you actually have down there. So as we're doing this, what we're actually going to do is change the shape of our traffic pattern to make it more circular is the best way to describe it. So I'm going to go ahead and slow the plane down. I'm going to made sure that my RPM is set pretty low right now. All right, we're just kind of swinging around this way. Again, as you saw from the pattern, you can see there's that little clump of buildings. It's all industrial buildings right there. We're not worried about them too much. And what we're going to do is just swing, and as weird as this is going to be, we're going to do the best we can to stay on the east side of the highway here. So there's the bridge right there. There's the highway right off our nose, and you can see all the houses. And this is going to seem downright scandalous. For those of you who think of traffic patterns, you always think of them as giant rectangles. But the reality is, it's just a certain flow of traffic. The shape is actually going to be completely dependent on all the different factors. So now notice we're staying completely on this side of the river. And I'm trying to stay away from those houses, and I'm not touching my RPM at all. I'm getting myself all lined up, checking to make sure my landing gear are down. I've done my little compass checks here. My speed's looking pretty good. And now I'm actually going to take this traffic pattern as a turn versus lining myself up. So I'm going to get myself set up here. Now, according to the procedure, I'm supposed to go ahead and apply full RPM when I'm on short final. So I'm actually going to go ahead and increase my RPM to full there. And that's going to, of course, go over the dike. We're going to get turbulence like we do in the real world. It does that every time, I swear. All right, coming down on runway 2 here. They actually just cut those trees. It's much nicer than it used to be. All right, looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Speed's pretty good. And we're going to go ahead and lift that nose up. And we're going to reduce the power. And we're just going to wait for the bump. Nice. Make positive control, a little bit of crosswind, nothing too bad. And you can see we had a couple different things there in order to make our aircraft make as little noise as possible on our actual approach down there to a landing. Now, one of the things you actually find is at some airports, they actually take this even further. Let me show you what I mean. Oh man, they said it would be a good day today. I guess the rain just got icky. So, one of the things I was mentioning with those noise abatement procedures is sometimes procedures to actually land an aircraft, approach plates and stuff like that, will be customized in such a way that actually takes into account the fact that you have to be considering noise abatement. Now, one of the reasons I chose Hartford today was not only is it something I'm familiar with and it's something I've flown in and out of a few times, it's because it has an instrument approach that actually puts you at an angle to the runway in order to keep you from flying over the top of people's houses. Now, I find that kind of interesting because it's like, oh, wait, it seems kind of sketchy. It should be straight in, we should be thinking about the safety of the plane. But believe it or not, because of the minimums they established on the actual instrument approach, we can basically fly this instrument approach all the way down to the ground without having to worry so much about that. Now, if we were an airliner, which keep in mind, that little 4,400 foot runway doesn't accommodate airliners usually, I hope, we of course would have that limitation. Now, what I've actually done here, now this is kind of neat, is I actually have VNAV turned on. And the reason I have VNAV turned on is because of the fact that we have a little final approach fix that we're coming up on right now. I figured I might as well have the aircraft go ahead and kind of take the edge off of that particular project for us. So we're doing the RNAV for runway 2 here, and you can see it's taking us right over the river. Now, if you remember from the diagram earlier, the one that looks a little bit like this, you probably recognize the fact that when we were doing this, we were actually doing the same thing, but now we're just doing it on instrument conditions as opposed to flying it more conventionally, as you probably are familiar with. So we're going to go ahead and line ourselves up with the runway here. At any point, of course, I can reach down here and press the button. That's really not going to make that much of a difference. So we have our V path armed. Of course, we have our glide path armed as well. We're not going to have any of those two items enabled just yet. All right, just taking a look real quickly, double checking to make sure everything looks good to me. That looks pretty good to me. You can see we have a little bit of a vertical speed requirement. And you can see our little vertical speed. It's going to be a race between VNAV and a race between the glide path hold at the same time. We're slightly high here, but again, there's no real big problem here. Now, the interesting thing is when you do things with VNAV plus glide path combined, the VNAV will take over until the glide path takes over. So keep that in mind as you are setting yourselves up for these approaches here. So we can see right now in just a minute, I'll go ahead and speed up time just a little bit here, and I'll kind of get us moving along here so you can kind of see how they're racing each other. It's always fun to try to see which one catches first, and VNAV catches first. So there's our VNAV. It's going to grab us, and there's the glide path. So again, one of the fantastic uses of VNAV and glide path together is you can use the VNAV to get you to the glide path, and then you can use the glide path, of course, to get us down to the ground. So we're going to go fly this approach conventionally here. I'm actually going to massively reduce power here because we have started our descent. And we're going to come down to about 15 inches, and then we're going to leave the RPM control alone. One of the suggests, by the way, look at how fast this thing slows down. One of the things they told us not to do, of course, was not to increase the propeller RPM at any point where you're going to put us in a situation where we're going to make a lot of extra noise. But if you actually look right now, and you can't really see this well, and you'll see it much more clearly when we get a little bit closer to the ground, just how not on target we actually are. And again, we'll be flying this one. We're not going to land this aircraft here. We're just going to get ourselves very close to the ground, just so you can see exactly how ridiculous it actually is. I'm actually going to reduce power just a lot more. All right, I think I've closed the cowl flaps already. It's a bit dark in here. I mean, this probably was not the best day to go flying, but we're a Bonanza. Well, we've got our IFR. We're good to go here. We can manage this pretty easily. All right, got to start slowing down. I'll go ahead and speed up time a little bit here. I always like it when you get a little stutter and you can't tell how hard you speed up time here. I think we're at double. We'll do 3 times speed here. There we go. And let me go ahead and take us out of our acceleration here. And take a look. Ta-da! So you can see here that the noise abatement procedure was actually built in to the actual VNAV approach. So that meant, even though you think things are always coming in straight, they don't have to come in straight. They have to go in a way that makes the most sense for the train, as well as accommodates the needs of the people around in the community. Enjoy.